Hello and welcome to Cultivate to Thrive podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Gunn. I'm a self actualization and mindset coach at Cultivate and Thrive. And I am on a mission to help Christian professional moms thrive in their reclaimed value while they cultivate a fulfilling and purposeful life. Now, many times on these episodes, you will just hear me sharing some tips and some things, some knowledge to help you improve and move forward. Sometimes I'll have special guests that have something great to share, especially things that I want to share with you to help you in your journey of life. Now, you can find this podcast, whether it's live or on replay, here on my own Michelle Gunn LinkedIn page, Facebook page, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also find my business page, Cultivate and Thrive, on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and my website, michellegunn.com. That's right, my website is Michelle Gunn, 1L, 2 N's, michellegunn.com. I invite you to participate in the comment section. I invite you to reach out to me via email, DM. You can find contact information on my website. Let's chat. Welcome, everyone, and I'm very excited for today's episode, Faith and Masculinity, Navigating the Modern World with our special guest, Chris Rangel. Welcome. I invite everyone to let us know that you're here by adding in the comments where you're joining us from. And if you're joining on the replay, please use hashtag replay. Now, it looks like I might be having some issues streaming to Facebook. Facebook's got some new, we'll just say, stuff in place. So I'm not quite sure if it's going live there. It's supposed to, but welcome. And we have Reagan joining us from Uganda. Thank you. And it's in the middle of the night there. So thank you. Thank you. You will love our special guest today, Chris, and I'm going to head and bring him on. Welcome, Chris.
Hey Michelle, it's so good to see you. How you been?
Good. It's been so long since we've had a chat.
It really has. It's like sometimes the time just flies by, and I feel like we text each other on the holidays usually, asking how the family's doing and things like that. And I don't realize, like, oh my gosh, it's been like 6 months since I've even talked to Michelle.
I know. Well, I like to start off every episode with some scripture. Do you have a favorite scripture that you'd like to share?
Yeah. You know what? I think that a lot of times we can resort to scriptures like for different things going on in our life. Today, the one that was on my mind today was, of course, John 3:16, right? Because I think we get caught up in the hustle and bustle of all kind of different things. And I was like, you know what? It's just really been on my mind today, that that one verse and the power of that verse. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, and whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life.
Beautiful. And my favorite verse that I love to share is Matthew 28:19-20. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always until the end of age. And I think you do that well, Chris.
Thanks. I mean, I mean, one of those things. I think it's like, oh gosh, could I ever do that justice? You know what I mean? I think we all feel like that at one time or another.
Yep, our friend Ronald is in the house. I bet it's been a long time since you've
Ronald,
spoken with Ronald.
goodness, how are you doing, brother? It's so good to see you.
And we have a son. Yep, thank you. Welcome, welcome. He's saying good morning. So he's on a different part of the earth, I'm sure. And this is very special since June I've dedicated to men. I usually don't, being that Father's Day is this month. And I thought of no one better to talk about men and faith than Chris. Because Chris has very active on your Instagram and you have a YouTube channel. I have shared the links. You want to tell us about what your mission is
Yeah, yeah.
there?
So the YouTube channel I'm not as active on, but on Instagram, that's where I'm pretty much every day creating content. So that started, and the mission still is basically to represent Catholicism to what a lot of us might know as cultural Catholics, like folks that grew up Catholic, but they didn't know the how and why of Catholicism. They have what I would call like the muscle memory down of being Catholic. You know, you do these things and you go on these days, and but they didn't really know why, but they appreciated it. It was a part of their life. So I started that page with the notion, like the remembrance of like growing up later, you know, in early adulthood, and asking my mom, like, "Hey, why do Catholics do this or that?" And she's like, "I don't remember. Like, I went through Catholic school my whole life. I did all of that. I really don't know, son. I don't know." So I sought out answers over the years when I came back into the church, and I'm like, you know what? I would really like to share what I've learned about the Catholic Church and the hows and whys. So I started that Instagram page, put a little bit of time into the YouTube page, and I saw that Instagram was really the one that developed traction, and I just kind of stuck with that. So ultimately, the goal is to represent Catholicism in a way that's easier to understand for folks that grew up that way.
Yeah, I think that many of us did things because we were told to, right?
Yeah.
We didn't really ask questions, and I think, like you said, our parents did the same. So there is a deep lack of knowledge, and plus, when we go throughout life, many times we have our faith because it was given to us, and we
Mhm.
were told that's what we believe, and we don't really question it. And I think questioning is good because that's really how we learn.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad you say that because something that we encourage our kids to do a lot. You know, my son was confirmed just last month, and it was one of those things where we did not pressure him to do it at all. It was like, hey, man, if you want to go to the classes, you want to go to the faith formation classes, the confirmation preparation classes, absolutely. But when the day comes, it's totally up to you whether or not you're going to be confirmed and you're going to live out this call as a confirmed Catholic. It's totally up to you. And we've always encouraged our kids since they were really young to ask questions, even if they felt they were tough, even if they felt like, you know, like maybe it would show that they didn't believe something or they didn't understand something. We always encourage them to do what you just said, is ask questions, because I don't want them to grow up feeling a lot like a lot of folks we know, right? You grew up and you don't question it. You just, it's just the way it is. Like, well, that's not enough.
Right. I learned 2 ways. One, I became a catechist, taught faith formation, because I sent my kids like a good daughter, right? Get them baptized, we send them to faith formation, and then I volunteered to teach because we got a discount on the tuition, so why not, right? Well, it's hard to teach something that you don't know.
Right.
And then my husband was Baptist and he started asking questions about the faith. And I was working in a church, and my manager, I'd ask her a question and she'd say, go look it up. So I learned how to use a concordance because that's where she told me to go look first. Many people don't even know what that big book is.
Yes.
And so I learned along with him stuff that I should have probably already known.
Hmm.
But yeah, definitely deepened my faith as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to I did provide you some questions because I have an inquisitive mind, and we're talking about men and faith and navigating the world. And so what do you view are some traditional values of masculinity that still hold relevance into today's society?
Yeah. With that question, right away, as a Catholic, I went to like the model that Saint Joseph is, like the model husband, father, worker, right? Um, there's this image that came to mind that my best friend is the one that introduced me to it, where it's a statue of Saint Joseph holding Mary and baby Jesus, and in that moment, like you can picture that was once a reality. Joseph was holding Mary and baby Jesus in his arms as, and they are the church, right?
Hmm.
And I immediately go to Saint Joseph when I think about being a dad, being a man, because I think about the call to be, for me, because my call was to be married, to be a husband. My call was to be a father, and to be a provider or worker, right? And to keep my family safe. So I think that even today, those just very basic ideas of being a husband, father, worker, if that's your call, I think those are still very much relevant. I think we're still called as men to be the provider, to keep our families safe, and to keep them in our arms. One of the things that I've told people many times is that, when you're in your mother's womb, you once basically shared the same heartbeat as your
Mm.
mom, and you shared a heartbeat, right? So the love a mother has, like the dad will never know that one, not that one. But it's the dad's job to spend the rest of his life showing their kids that his heart beats for them too, right? And that call alone, I think, is worthy of devoting your life to.
Wonderful. So, how does faith influence your perception of manhood and vice versa?
That's such a good question. Whenever you gave me that one, I immediately kind of thought about part of my own story. So I think that until I found my faith, which was when I was about 25, until I found my faith, I didn't really have an understanding of what love was. Not really. And what I mean by that is, once I found my faith, once I started reading the Bible, once I started going to mass, once I started, asking the catechist's questions and stuff at 25, and I've got kids that they were very young at the time, I started to understand how, in order to be the best dad that I could be, or the best father that I could be, I needed to understand how our Heavenly Father loves,
Mm.
right? And it's through all things, and it's at all times, and it's everything that we would need it to be as His sons and daughters, right, on earth. So I think that faith definitely gave me like the foundation I needed ultimately, um, to be a good foundation for my kids, to be a good dad for my kids, because I think, I mean, I know I definitely wish that I would have found my faith earlier. But
You're not alone.
but that was just my journey, right? But I think that for me, finding my faith was my understanding of how to love, and it was to love as best I can as our Heavenly Father does.
Wonderful. So you brought up a really good point. You said you wish you found your faith earlier. I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people. And it may be getting even harder in today's society to really live out your faith boldly. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing men in terms of living out their faith in the modern world?
Yeah, I think it's not just for men. I think it's for a lot of us, or everybody. I One of the things that I say when I speak to like the high school and stuff like that is, if if you're not careful, the world will shape you into what it wants you to be.
Mm.
We have to be very aware, and as adults and as mentors and as the older generation, we have to give our younger generations the truth through the eyes of the church, through the eyes of scripture, so they see the world through that lens. What is true? If we don't do that first, the world gives them that lens, and it's kind of, that view is a bit blurry. It's off. Um, so I think that one of the challenges for sure is trying to stay true to who you are, and trying to resist all of the things that maybe tempting you. I think that's for all of us, not just men.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much temptation in this evil world we live in.
Yeah.
So, do you have any recommendations how men can navigate the societal expectations while staying true to their Christian beliefs?
Yeah. Um, I do. And for me, that one I gotta like I specifically gotta go like Romans chapter 12 because it tells us not to conform to the pattern of this world.
Yeah.
So my advice would be to remember that, to stay grounded in the Bible, in the truth that is Jesus, and the saving power that is Jesus. And I think the best thing to do is to remember that, and to, like you said, to ask questions like, what does that mean? What does it mean to not conform to the patterns of this world? And then seek out those answers like you and I did. You were
Mhm.
asking questions, you were looking up the answers. I think that's one of the big mistakes that people make, especially when we're younger, is we don't ask enough questions for a lot of different reasons. It could be because we don't really want the answer. It could be because we know the answer is one we don't want to hear. It could be just, our own ego getting in the way. But I think that we definitely have to be deliberate about not conforming to the world because we're not meant for here forever. One of the things that I say a lot too is that you have to remember that all of this will pass away, right? But
Right.
soul is for eternity. You'll spend that eternity either with God or without Him. So don't conform to the pattern of the world.
All right. And I think I'm gonna put Reagan's comment back up because I think that was maybe um also very timely for this discussion, right? He's learned how to forgive and forget anyone who has hurt him physically and spiritually.
Mm,
And when you're talking about conformity, I think a lot of that happens. People get hurt because they're not accepted because they're not conforming to the way society wants you to be.
right. Wow. What a great point. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that in those types of scenarios, because they come up all the time, right? Especially when you're living according to your Christian faith, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
challenge to that, in the world. So I think that just being aware, like your supporter is there of your channel, just being that aware that it's a reality, that it affects you, it affects people around you. That entire witness like can resonate through your life through an entire generation, right? So I think there's a lot of significance to what they just said.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what role does mentorship and community play in shaping a man's spiritual journey and in the understanding of his masculinity?
Oh man, what a great question. So, one of the things that pops out right away for me is a lot of us have probably looked at the statistics of those who grow up in a home without a father figure.
Mm,
Right? It's very impactful to not have a father figure and to have one. Um, and I think that as far as mentorship and development, I think that it's important as a man, as a dad, for me, it's important to be the one that helps form and helps guide and listens to my kids. Because I think that, like I was saying before, if I don't encourage my kids to ask questions, let's
mhm,
say my son, for example, because we're talking about men, right? If I don't encourage him to ask questions, one of the things that a lot of people will do is they'll just make up their own truth or decide what is true, or they'll take the truth of someone else that's older than them, right? And they may not be a good influence, but they'll come up with their own version of what is the truth they believe to be, and they'll live according to that, right? And they could be way off track. Um, so I think when it comes to mentorship and helping them spiritually and otherwise in their life, I think we have to live the example. I mean, our kids hear us a lot of times, but they do what we do, or they do the opposite of what we do. Um, so I think we have to live it for sure, but also I think that we have to encourage them um, to understand their purpose, like according to God,
mhm.
and to understand that they're not just here for themselves. as a man or as a woman, you're not just here for you. You're called to a lot more than that.
Absolutely. So where do you suggest men go to find mentorship and community to be able
You-
to develop themselves spiritually?
oh man, and if you had asked me that like 10 years ago, I would have no idea what to say, right? Um, and I think that's like suggestive of itself. But now, and having kids, because I've wanted my kids to have um, opportunities in their lives that I didn't have. Because I want them to ask questions, like tough questions, and find the answers. Because I want them to put their heart in something, and I want to support it, and I want to see them grow in it. I think they need to go wherever it is there is positive influence, right? So, for example, with our kids, we deliberately try to seek out different things that are a positive influence that are challenging. For example, like with our son, he plays travel soccer. We traveled hours to find someone who used to be a professional soccer player so that he could see this person, talk to them, and like be like, oh man, this is so cool, right? Because he has a passion for it. I want that spark in his mind, like, wait, this is real. Like, okay, how did you get there? How'd you do this? We've had them, we've been fortunate enough to meet people at other gatherings who, like Navy SEALs, for example, folks like,
Mhm.
and they get to talk to them about their service and the challenges they overcame. And, my kids listen to them talking. And those to me are positive influences that give our kids some type of wonder. It gives them a chance to ask questions. It gives them a chance to believe in themselves, or wonder what they could do or what they're capable of. So I think that where they could go specifically, of course, would be to God in prayer. Of course, would
Mhm.
friends, family, but also to really seek out whatever you're into, whatever your passion is, your interests, your hobbies. Just look for positive influences in that arena.
Awesome. So, how can men contribute positively to conversations around gender equality and inclusivity, but within Christianity?
Yeah, that's a great question too. For that one, I actually went through and like I want to select some scripture that I feel speaks to that directly. So I was looking in First Corinthians chapter 11, verse 7 through 12, and I'll read it and then I'll kind of give where I was coming from with this one. So it says, uh, "For a man ought not have his head veiled, since he is the image and reflection of God, but woman is the reflection of man. Indeed, man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for the sake of woman, but woman for the sake of man. For this reason, a woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, or man independent of woman. For just as a woman came from man, so man comes through woman. But all things come from God." So I think that when it comes to that, we all have equal value according to God, right? We're all created in the image of God for his goodness and to do his will. So I think that when it comes to any of those types of conversations, it would be important to start there. We have equal value according to God. One's person's soul is no less valuable than the other. One person's call is no less significant than the other. That's where I would say we have to start with any of those types of conversations. And I think it's important to, in those types of conversations, to define what we mean by equality. Like that's kind of where I was going with that.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I like what you're saying because of course, um, I think every person has a unique value. Like you said, God gave us an individual purpose, yet our purpose isn't for us alone. It's for the rest of the people to build up the kingdom, whatever that looks like, but we are unique and valuable yet dependent on each other,
Yeah,
interdependent on each other.
right, right. It like made for each other, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that would be my appreciation for it. I think that those types of conversations can as we can see, like in a lot of different platforms and stuff, those types of conversations can get really ugly if you
Mm,
don't start with something like that. You know, um,
right.
so being Christian, that's where I would start. That's where I would start with any of it.
Love it. Love it. So, what ways can Christian men support and empower each other in facing personal and societal challenges?
I loved these questions, by the way, when you said, because I think questions that they're not talked about enough. Thank you for doing this month devoted to masculinity. I know you work with women throughout the year.
Mhm,
I think this is just so cool that you're doing this. I think that being the guy that I am, and having a son and a daughter and being married for 16 years, I think that one of the most important things men can do for each other is be honest with each other. And what I mean is, you know what? If as a dad, I see a man who I'm close to in my life, right? He's in my church community, he's a close friend. Um, if I see him failing, like flat out failing in an aspect of his life, and it could be this simple. It could be like you've really let yourself go. Like you don't take care of yourself at all anymore. You're very busy, very stressed out. Like you need to do something, right? To try to help yourself be around longer for your family, or like be able to do other things with your family without, getting too overly stressed about it. It could be something like that, right? Be honest with each other, right? Don't let it go. I think that a lot of us men, I think a lot of us at some point in our lives, but most of us throughout our lives, we want to sacrifice for something. We want to fight for something. We want to stand up for something. And I think that we misunderstand, especially if we're a parent, that's what being a dad is.
mhm.
You're fighting for something every day, for your kids' future, for the betterment, to give the world a new generation that's better than the one before, that's closer than the one before, that closer to God. You're you're dying to yourself so that your kids have the future that you didn't have, right? And you're sacrificing. And I think a lot of us men don't see that, or we don't see it until it's too late. Our kids are grown up or something like that, and they're out of the house. So I think one of the most important things is to be honest with each other. I think a lot of people kind of boil it down to accountability. It's like hold each other accountable. Um,
Mhm.
right on. Like I totally agree with that. But I would say, as like if I was talking to another man and we were talking about this kind of thing, and it was someone close to me or in my church community, I would be very direct and very straightforward about like, hey man, tell me where I'm messing up. Like you see me from the outside and I'll tell you too. And let's figure it out. Because I don't think that there's enough of that. I think that there's a lot of um, hey, I'm just getting by. Or I'm just being uh, I don't want to say superficial, but I'm just kind of checking all the boxes, and being the dad and being the husband and working, and I'm just busy. I think there's a lot of that because it's easy to get caught up in that in the world, and there's not enough of, hey, let's look at what's going on here. Obviously, something's off, and let's be very honest with each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of the appearances, especially with social media being as important as it is. Everybody is showing their perfect life.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah, that's yeah, exactly what I'm talking about.
You don't see the Facebook post that said, "Oh, yay, my kid was kicked out of college today." Yeah. That
Right, right. And for example, and I'm not talking about anybody in particular, and I'm not speaking negative about people who like to stay fit or anything like that. But one of the things that I think in my mind a lot of times is if I see someone who is in great shape and they're on a fitness journey, and let's say they're like my age, um, and I'm like, wow, they've really turned their fitness around. I mean, they look fantastic. They can do great things. Their diet is perfect, and they tell me about it and they're posting about it. One of the things I think right away is, well, but how's your marriage? Like, how's your family? I
Mm.
mean, because that takes a lot of time to do what you're doing. How are the kids doing? Like, how's your relationship with the kids? And how's that going? Like, how's everything going with everything else? Because as we know, when we commit to something, right, something else has to suffer for it. For me, I try to be very careful of that, especially in this season in my life.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really a good question, and it's not even you use the example of physically fit, but I think that works the same way with someone who, like you mentioned earlier, that doesn't take care of themselves at all. There's definitely deep issues there that they probably need someone who's honest and can have that frank conversation with them.
Yeah, and that's what's really cool too about this whole thing. That's what you do.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate this, and I appreciate that men get to see that side of it, right? Like they get to see some of your perspective and how you dive into these things. Because I've known it for a couple of years, but there's a lot of guys that don't know that. So.
Oh, awesome. So, how do you balance the pursuit of success and ambition with spiritual fulfillment and humility as a Christian man?
Yeah. So that's something that has hit me really hard, I would say, over the past 3 years. Um, I have learned to be careful and deliberate how I define success. Right. So there was definitely a time in my life when my kids were much younger where I saw success as, rising to the top in the workplace and having nice things and that kind of thing. I don't see it that way at all anymore. Actually, try to avoid that as much as I can. So I'm careful and deliberate to define success, but I also something that goes right along with that is like I said, about 3 years ago, I started appreciating the blessing that I know as the season of life, whatever season that is. So, like right now, for example, I am definitely in this season where my kids are both doing a lot outside of school, along with school. So, I'm working, I'm spending the evenings at either one of their activities, and we still have regular life to live and other responsibilities. So, I've really settled into the understanding of how much of a blessing it is to appreciate this season of life and to kind of like I was saying earlier, to die to myself so my kids can live this life and have other opportunities to do different things, other choices. So I would definitely say those two things, like understanding how I define success and then appreciating my season of life, because without having those two in line, I would still feel like, I don't know, I was just kind of on autopilot and kind of chasing these different things that are so temporary and they don't really provide fulfillment. Uh, so I think along with that, I think I mentioned it a second ago, but appreciating that all of it's a blessing. The stressed out and being tired from driving an hour to soccer practice, sitting there for 2 hours and driving back home and doing that 4 days a week and then doing volleyball and all these other things on top of work and school. I think appreciating that all of it's a blessing, and I only get this small window of a few years to enjoy and to help form my kids through that. Um, that's been a big help for me. So hopefully it would be a help to others too to understand it that way.
Yeah, as a empty nester, I definitely would second that, to really appreciate this, like you said, the season of life that you're in, because you don't get to do that again. You don't get those opportunities and those moments, the good with the bad. You don't get any of it again. And you
Yeah.
really need to appreciate it and make the most of it and let your kids know that you're there. Definitely.
Thank you for saying that, and I appreciate you giving me that feedback, because it's like I know that like in theory, but I don't know it like you do, and
Yeah.
I can see glimpses of it now, but I don't know it like you do. It's like people told me, oh, my kids were toddlers. Oh, you better enjoy it because it flies by. Well, my son's in his teens now, and my daughter's almost a teenager. It's like, wow, I really know what that feels like now. And there's, so I appreciate you sharing that. This is definitely going to be.
Yeah, I have to tell you, when my youngest had her son, when they had their son, they lived with us for a little bit, and I do not remember the awe that I see in her face and in her words as her son does stuff for the first time. I know I must have felt it,
Yeah.
but seeing it through somebody else's eyes is just it's amazing, and then you realize how special that was when you got to experience it.
It's interesting you say that because it makes me think, and maybe you feel this too. Again, I won't know it like you do because you're a mom. Um, my mom says there's a different experience she has with her grandkids versus with her own kids. There's something different about it. Um, so you probably know what that means.
Yeah.
I know what that
I'm
means.
gonna tell lack of responsibility and blame, yeah. Although we still get that because, we have the thing in our house, my daughter's like, "Well, you act just like your mom," and I'm like, "Well, joke's on you because you act like me." Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that's this right here. I think what we're doing here in these moments is huge. I think it goes along with a lot of the things that we're talking about this whole time. Is you're sharing with me like some wisdom and some experience, and trying to impart some things that you've learned, even just in the glimpses that I've seen. I think that speaks to probably everything we're talking about. Is like we were talking about faith in the beginning and how it was handed on to us,
Mhm.
right? But there's this part too, just everyday life and how to appreciate something. It's like, Michelle, how do I do that? So I can do it even better than you did, or with even more than you did. How do I do that? And you're,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and we make sure we impart our faith in everyday life, in every little thing. When we're teaching our kids, when we're living as examples for other humans, as we're supporting men and women, absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
So, let's see. What advice do you have for young men who are struggling to find their identity and purpose in today's fast paced world?
hmm There's a couple of different dynamics to that one that I usually try to speak to um, when I'm talking to teens and stuff. So one of the main things that I try to help them understand to one degree or another is you're practicing being someone every day. So
Mhm.
right now, in the decisions that you make and how you respond to something and the temptations that you give into and the temptations that you can resist, everything that you do, you're practicing being the person you will become one day. You just don't realize it. And so you have to be aware of that so that you practice being who you want to be. Um, I think that's definitely something that's important, and I try to share with young men. The other thing is having them trying to have them understand how important it is, like that natural pain of growth, we'll call it, right?
Mhm.
Everything that you're going to do in your life is going to be a struggle of some kind if it's worth doing. If there's growth involved, it could be studying. You're going to have to spend a lot of time studying to be very good or knowledgeable about this thing. It could be your physical fitness. You're going to go through like that pain of your muscles being burnt out and tired so that you can grow them and be faster or stronger. Your relationships, there's going to be ups and downs, times when you're trying to figure it out and it's painful, but it's for your betterment and it's for growth. Um, so I try to help them understand those types of things as much as I can. The other thing that I think is super important is having them try to appreciate what it is that they're passionate about, if that's in them, right? Like, so if it's they play a sport, if they like music, if they like art, whatever it is, try to understand what that is, or at least appreciate what it is, and tell someone about that, someone close to you, your
Mm.
parents, friends, whoever, so that you have support, because it's very easy to put your heart somewhere else when it belonged in the other place. So I tell my kids this all the time. Like, my wife and I have said, you know what? When our kids were very young, we're like, we're going to do our best to support our kids wherever their passion is. And we'll do whatever we can to do that, because if we see that they have a passion for something and they're putting their heart into it, we want to support and nurture that. Otherwise, just from personal experience, if we don't do that, they will put their heart into something else.
Mhm.
And that something else could be something that's no good for them. It could be something that's okay. It could be something that yields a lot of fruit, like good fruit, or doesn't. But it won't be what they loved. It may not be what they were, the gift they were given. So if we see that, we'll do all we can to support it there. So that's why I say, talking to young people, it's like, hey, if you have something that you really enjoy doing and you're passionate about it, make sure people that are close to you know that. So you have that support. The world's going to do enough to try to shape you into what it wants you to be. You have to have everything along the way to help you kind of combat that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do firmly believe that when we have a passion for something, there's generally an underlying innate talent where that comes from that's also connected to our purpose.
Wow, what a way to say that. Yes. And you put words to that, and it's interesting because we can see that a lot in kids around us. It's
Mhm.
different things, like all kind of different things. Some of the kids that we know, they're middle and high school age. They're like, for example, some of them are awesome speakers. Some of them are awesome at sports. Some of them are awesome at music. Some are great at art. And like you say, it's like, wow, they're passionate about it, but there's also this like natural talent that nobody can really explain. I had never really heard it put in words like that. That's really cool.
Hmm. Yep, keep your eye out for your kids so you can nurture that, Sometimes it's not always as parents, it's not always what we want for our kids. We have to put what our desires are aside for what's really truly better for our kids or
Absolutely.
how they were created.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And I think and I don't think it's by coincidence at all, being a Christian, but that's where I've found myself in that season of life right now. Like, I haven't worked out, like really worked out in 2 years because I'm just too busy. I love to read like nonfiction and just learn about pretty much anything. And I've always been like a reader like that. I've always been into exercising my entire life. It was always important to me. But with as busy as we've become, and nurturing and trying to help our kids discover what it is that their passion is, or their gift, or and doing all that for the past few years, like I said, about 3 years, um, that's where I found myself. It's like, that's what I'm doing. I'm serving and I'm giving up myself for for their life.
Awesome. So, how can Christian men foster healthy relationships with others, including women, while upholding their faith values?
Yeah, I think that for that one, I gotta go straight to love God with all your being, love your neighbor as yourself. I think that everything changes when we treat each other as children of God instead of just,
Mhm.
because if I look at anyone like, wow, my neighbor, a stranger, like, that's God's son, or that's a daughter of God, everything changes. Being a Christian man, everything changes at that moment. Um, so I think that when it comes to those types of scenarios, just love God and love your neighbor as yourself, and see each other as children of God.
Perfectly said. Is there any other wisdom you'd like to impart on everyone today?
Oh man, no, but I would like to say that if you are someone that maybe fell away from your faith, your Christian faith, or you're someone who's struggling through it right now, or maybe you just want to revisit some things about it, have questions answered that you never got answered. Please, I hope that you seek out answers. And like Michelle was saying earlier, it is very fruitful, and she was basically suggesting that it's a good thing, and it's worth the time to spend to look up the answers and to seek out the answers. So if you're one of those folks that is struggling in your faith in any way, or you have questions, I hope that you seek out the answers.
Awesome. And again, although I did put the links in, you want to let everyone know the best places to get a hold of you.
Yeah. So, as she was mentioning earlier, I'm really active on Instagram, not on YouTube. I'm going to start being more active on YouTube pretty soon, but I pretty much have content every day on Instagram, and it's my username is Catholic Dad _23. And if you like, you can put some questions in the comments there on any of the videos. I have, I think, over 200 of them now, all explaining Catholic stuff. Or you can just send me a DM over there, and I'd be happy to chat with you.
Awesome. So you're a great resource for men who are wanting to grow in their faith and also for fatherhood.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Michelle. Thank you.
Oh, and probably husband as well. I'll
Yeah.
have to ask your wife. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and having this great discussion, Chris. I really appreciate it. It's been too long since we chatted,
It
for
really is.
sure.
Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, Michelle. God bless you.
Awesome. God bless you too. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.